All right, how's everyone doing? I am Rich Celenza. Thanks for checking out the Rich Celenza Show. So, what I'm going to call this podcast is You May Not Always Be Who You Think You Are. Now, I know you may think I'm crazy with a lot of these titles and kind of how I come into these discussions. But I do think, and I'm going to mainly talk about men in this one from my perspective, I'm not a woman, but I think when I talk about this subject matter, it's going to relate more to men. I'm not saying that women can't listen to it, but I do think with a lot of men that they think there's something that they're not. I also think a lot of times, I'll just use for example, so I think a lot of men think they're a lot tougher than they are. Or they're as strong as, say, if they're middle-aged or older, they're as strong as they used to be. Some are, but a lot aren't. Also, a lot, I think they're a lot smarter than they really are. A lot of people, not just men in that case. I think also a lot of people have this perception of themselves, right? And they think other people have this perception of them. Now, I'm not here to tell you that you have to be a certain way so people could accept you or not, or, any of that. But I do think, and I see this with a lot of people, that they think other people see them the same way that they see themselves. That's not egotistical either. It's not what I'm saying. So a lot of people, I think, may think that they may be seen as somebody, let's say, who's successful in business. But the reality is when you talk to that person, the people on the outskirts or whatever, they know that person's not actually that successful. And that's not a dig. I'm not trying to dig on people here. But I do think people have to take a realistic approach on, who they are, first of all. Because again, you may have been something in your past, or you may have been successful. You also may have failed. Okay? So this goes the other way too. You may have been a failure in your past, and you're kind of very successful now, but you still kind of look at yourself as a failure. Don't think that way. A lot of people, I think, have a lot of these things. It could be even, a lot of people that were heavyset, for instance, then they lose a lot of weight. Sure, they know they lost weight, but for some reason in their mind, they still feel fat, or they think people still look at them as being fat. All these different types of things. So I don't want people to think that it's just about, ego. It could be many different things. And I think the one thing we have to do is really sit back and really figure out, who are we? Like, really? Because I don't think a lot of us do that. And I also think we have, how do I say this? I'll say again for men. A lot of dudes, and I'm going to go back to this as far as kind of like a toughness or an attitude or a badass thing. A lot of dudes, and I'm not saying there's not badasses out there. There's millions of them. I'll tell you right now. There's also millions of pussies out there. And I've done previous podcasts on this and YouTube videos on be very aware, because I think a lot of men and women get in a bad position sometimes because of their mouth or their behavior. Because, for one, again, they think they're tough. Now, either they get confronted and they back down, or they get confronted and get the shit kicked out of them. Because, again, they may have been tougher, they may have been in better shape, they may have wrestled in high school, but now you're in your 40s and now you're up against a guy who's 25 that's a jiu-jitsu guy. Or, who knows, he's just a lot stronger than you at this point in time, just in better shape than you. And again, I'm using that as kind of an extreme example. But just really, I think what I'm trying to say in this podcast, just in general, is pay attention to, and I have to go through this sometimes, I'm just telling you, be aware of how people are responding to you. Because I think a lot of people just aren't as aware as they should be. You can kind of see sometimes, you may even be in this situation, or someone may be doing it to you, or they're talking to you and you're checking out, like you got to go, or you're not interested. They keep going on and on and on, right? You're like, dude, I'm trying to walk away. Eventually, you turn this person off. You talk so much, you've exhausted them. Now they almost never want to hear from you again. And I think a lot of us sometimes could get long-winded if you like having conversations. You also got to pay attention to, maybe if you're in the dating world or whatever, how you're treating men or women on both sides. How are you really acting through this? Is this a phony disposition? Is your demeanor, is it authentic? Are you somebody who's putting somebody through an interrogation? Also, say you're people that you're meeting for the first time, not even dating, just in general. People you work with. Kind of really take an honest approach and say, how do I behave at work? How do I behave when I go somewhere and things don't go my way? Do I just automatically lash out? Do I start treating these employees? I don't care if it's a waiter or a waitress. I don't care if it's in a sales associate. I don't care if it's a flight attendant. How do you behave in a lot of environments when things don't go your way? Because I don't think a lot of people really see themselves like that. I remember when I made my first film, I used a lot of family members in my film I was incorporating. And that was the first time, because the first time they ever seen themselves on video, really. Really. I mean, I'm talking the late 1990s. But unless you were like somebody who grew up in a family with the camera out and videotaping yourself all the time, you didn't see yourself on video a lot, unless maybe you were in film or television or something. My family members, I would show them rough cuts. They were actually astonished at the way they looked, the way they act, even like behind the scenes stuff. So I'd be rolling the camera while I was even directing them. Sometimes I always wasn't cutting it, and they're like, "Oh my God, is that what I sound like? That's what my voice is," and all these different types of things. Now, that doesn't mean they were bad. Of course not. I love them for who they were. But sometimes you do have to take an honest approach on your behavior, is what I should say, because I talk a lot of times about self-awareness. But I really don't think a lot of people genuinely they don't take an honest approach on their behavior, on how they treat not only family members, friends, and colleagues, but how do they treat themselves. And I just wanted to do a quick podcast on this because I just think it's so interesting, this subject matter, and I just want to do a podcast on it, I guess you could say. And, you're, like I was saying at the beginning, you're not always who you think you are, especially to others, but I will go back to saying, you also sometimes may have this perception of yourself, and it's really not it. So, anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you get a chance, check out my website, and richcelenzapodcast.com. You got any questions or comments, hit me up. All right, take care.